They laughed when the janitor knelt beside the piano. Not polite laughter. Not awkward chuckles. It was sharp, careless, and loud enough to bounce off the marble walls of the Grand Aurelius Concert Hall. The kind of laughter that reminded you exactly where you stood in the world. "Careful there," a man in a tuxedo said, sipping champagne. "Those keys cost more than his car." Another voice followed. "If he scratches it, they'll dock his pay for the next decade." Elias Moreau didn't look up. He was on his knees beside the 9-foot Steinway, grey uniform slightly wrinkled, sleeves rolled up. A small toolkit lay open next to him, each instrument placed with quiet precision. His hands hovered over the exposed mechanism, fingers steady despite the noise around him. The hall was alive tonight. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light across polished floors. Velvet seats stretched in perfect rows. The city's elite filled the space with laughter, perfume, and practiced generosity. Tonight was a charity gala, money raised for the arts by people who believed art lived somewhere above them, not within them. At center stage sat the Steinway, the crown jewel of the hall, and one stubborn key that refused to rise properly. That single flaw had delayed everything. Technicians had tried. Specialists had shrugged. Finally, someone had muttered, "Let maintenance take a look." So Elias was called. The janitor. He had been invisible for most of the night. Emptying bins. Wiping railings. Blending into corners the way he always did. Being unseen was easier. Safer. But the moment he knelt by the piano, eyes found him. Judged him. Measured his worth in seconds. A woman in a red gown leaned toward her companion. "Why is he touching it like that? Does he even know what he's doing?" Her companion smirked. If he knew anything about music, he wouldn't be cleaning bathrooms. More laughter. Elias inhaled slowly through his nose. Silence had become his armor over the years. Silence meant no questions. Silence meant no explanations. Silence meant no one asked about the life he once lived. As his fingers gently pressed the faulty key, the world around him began to blur. The chandeliers dimmed. The laughter softened. And suddenly, Elias was no longer a janitor in a grand concert hall. He was 8 years old again. Bare feet on a cold wooden floor. A small apartment that smelled of old books and boiled coffee. Paint peeling from the walls. Furniture mismatched but loved. And in the corner of the room, a piano. Not grand. Not polished. But alive. His father sat there every evening after factory shifts that left his back aching and his hands raw. Yet when his fingers touched the keys, they moved with grace, as if pain had no permission to follow them there. "Come closer, Elias," his father would say, smiling softly. "Music isn't something you hear. It's something you listen to." Elias would sit on the floor, cross-legged, eyes wide as melodies filled the room. The piano spoke when words were unnecessary. It cried when his father couldn't. It laughed when money was short but hope still lingered. "Remember this," his father once said, pressing a chord slowly. "The world may take many things from you. But if you keep music inside, they can't take that." Then came the letters. Red ink. Late notices. Whispers between his parents after midnight. And one evening, a knock at the door. Men in work boots. The landlord standing behind them, arms crossed, eyes empty of mercy. Elias watched from the hallway as they lifted the piano. Watched his father stand still, not shouting, not pleading, just watching, like a man witnessing a funeral without permission to grieve. The piano left. And something inside Elias went silent. His father never played again. Life hardened. Music became impractical. Dreams became luxuries they could not afford. Years passed. His father died quietly, hands that once danced over keys folded still. Elias buried him with a promise he didn't know how to keep. Survive. A sharp voice snapped him back to the present. "Hurry up," the event coordinator hissed from the edge of the stage. "The maestro arrives in 10 minutes. Elias nodded without looking up. He adjusted a tiny screw beneath the key. Pressed gently. The note rose cleanly. Perfect. He tested it again. Flawless. The piano was ready. Elias wiped his hands on his pants and stood. The laughter lingered, softer now but still there. He should have walked away. That was his place. But something inside him, something long buried and aching, shifted. His eyes drifted to the keys. Just once, he thought. Just to hear it breathe. Elias Saturday. Gasps rippled through the hall. What is he doing? Is this a joke? A security guard took a step forward, then hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or wait for instruction. Elias pressed a single key. The sound rang clear. Pure. The hall stilled. Another note followed. Then another. Elias closed his eyes. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. The music came slowly, like a confession whispered after too much silence. Not loud. Not dramatic. Honest. It spoke of loss. Of small apartments and cold nights. Of fathers who loved deeply but lived quietly. Of dreams postponed, not destroyed. Conversations died. Glasses froze mid-air. The air itself seemed to lean closer. A woman near the aisle felt tears spill without understanding why. A man who had laughed earlier stared at the stage, throat tight, shame creeping in uninvited. Elias played the life he never got to live. And then, softly, he played hope. When the final note faded, the silence was heavy, sacred. No one breathed. Then a single clap echoed. Then another. Applause rose slowly, uncertain at first, then fuller, louder, unstoppable. Elias stood abruptly, panic flickering in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I was just checking the—" "That was extraordinary," the coordinator whispered, eyes wide. Before anything else could happen, the massive doors at the back of the hall opened. A hush fell instantly. Leon Hott Weiss entered. The world-renowned Maestro moved with calm authority, his presence bending the room around him. He approached the piano, eyes narrowing slightly, listening to the echo still hanging in the air. "Who played?" he asked. No one answered. Elias stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. Leon Hott's gaze found him. "You," he said softly. Elias nodded once. Leon Hott studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Would you play again?" And in that moment, everything Elias had buried, every sacrifice, every silent night, every humiliation, hovered on the edge of becoming something else entirely. But he didn't yet know that the laughter would return. That humiliation would come louder. And that the world would try, one last time, to remind him exactly where it believed his place was. The hall was still breathing when Elias sat back down. Not the easy breathing of comfort, but the shallow, suspended kind that comes right before something breaks, or changes forever. Applause still echoed faintly in the arches above, but it felt distant now, like it belonged to another moment, another life. Leon Hott Weiss stood a few feet away, hands folded behind his back, eyes fixed on Elias with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "Play," the Maestro said again, not loudly, but with a certainty that carried. Elias hesitated. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling now. The first time had been instinct. Muscle memory. A release he hadn't planned. This time felt heavier. Intentional. Exposed. He looked out at the audience. The same people who had laughed. The same people who had measured his worth by his uniform. Some faces had softened. Others were unreadable. A few still held thin smiles, as if waiting for the moment this turned embarrassing again. Elias swallowed. "I'm just the janitor," he said quietly. Leon Hott shook his head. "No. You are a musician who has been cleaning floors." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The coordinator wrung her hands. "Maestro, we're already behind schedule." Leon Hott lifted a finger without turning. "Music is never behind schedule." Silence returned. Elias closed his eyes. And then he played. This time, the music was different. The first piece had been memory. This one was gratitude. His fingers moved with more confidence now, finding pathways his body remembered even if his mind tried to doubt. The Steinway responded like an old friend, rich and resonant, filling the hall with warmth. He played his mother's laughter. He played the sound of his father humming softly while cooking dinner after late shifts. He played small kindnesses, a neighbor slipping them bread when money ran out, a teacher who let him stay after class just to touch the school piano for a few minutes. The music wrapped itself around the audience. People leaned forward unconsciously. Some closed their eyes. One man set his glass down carefully, afraid the sound might disturb something fragile. Elias felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Belonging. When he finished, the applause came faster this time. Louder. Less uncertain. Leonhardt nodded once, satisfied. "Thank you," the maestro said. "That is all I needed to hear." He turned toward the director, who looked pale now. "The piano is ready. But before I perform, I would like a word with this man." The director forced a smile. "Of course. We can arrange." "No," Leonhardt said. "Here. Now." The crowd buzzed again. Leonhardt stepped closer to Elias. "What is your name?" "Elias," he replied. "Elias Moreau." Leonhardt's breath caught so subtly most people missed it. "Moreau," he repeated. "Your father. Etienne Moreau." Elias's chest tightened. "Yes." A hush fell so deep it felt like the hall itself leaned closer. Leonhardt nodded slowly, eyes shining. "I thought so." Whispers spread like wind through dry leaves. Etienne Moreau. The Etienne Moreau. He disappeared years ago. Leonhardt turned to the audience, voice steady. Etienne Moreau was one of the finest pianists of his generation. He taught me when I was young. He taught me that music is truth before it is perfection. Elias felt dizzy. "My father worked in a factory," he said softly. He stopped playing. Leonhardt's expression darkened with understanding. The world is very good at silencing beautiful things. For a moment, it seemed like the hall might finally see Elias for who he was. But kindness, like music, is often tested before it is rewarded. The director cleared his throat sharply. "This is all very touching," he said loudly, reclaiming the room, "but we cannot derail a charity gala for sentimental anecdotes." A few people nodded. Others frowned. The director continued, voice growing firmer. "This man is not on tonight's program. He was not invited to perform. And regardless of his past, or his father's, rules exist for a reason." Elias felt the warmth drain from his chest. Leonhardt turned slowly. "Are you suggesting?" "I am stating," the director said, "that he overstepped his role." There it was. The reminder. The invisible line. People shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable. Others relieved, as if order were being restored. The director gestured toward Elias. "We thank you for your enthusiasm. But please return to your duties." A woman near the front whispered, "This is getting awkward." Another murmured, "It was nice while it lasted." Elias stood. Every instinct screamed at him to apologize. To shrink. To retreat back into invisibility where he belonged. "I understand," he said quietly. Leonhardt's jaw tightened. "Elias." "It's all right," Elias interrupted gently. "I didn't expect anything." That was the truth. Hope had flickered, yes. But hope was dangerous. Hope reminded you of what you lost. He turned to leave. As he walked, he heard fragments behind him. "Shame. Poor man. Still, rules are rules." Each word pressed down on him like weight. He reached the edge of the stage when a familiar voice stopped him. "Papa." Elias froze. A young girl stood near the aisle, clutching her mother's hand. Her eyes were wide, curious, unafraid. "You play like the man in my music book," she said simply. A ripple of emotion moved through the room. Elias knelt instinctively. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. The girl smiled. "Why are you leaving?" He didn't know how to answer that. Before he could, the director snapped, "That's enough. Escort him out." A guard stepped forward. The injustice crystallized in that moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. Elias walked past the piano without looking back. Behind him, Leonhardt remained standing, hands clenched, eyes burning with something that looked a lot like resolve. The doors closed behind Elias with a soft, definitive sound. Outside, the The night air was cool and unforgiving. Elias leaned against the stone wall, breathing hard. For a brief, foolish moment, he had felt seen. Now the silence returned. But somewhere inside the hall, something had shifted. And kindness, true kindness, was about to fight back. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The next morning came without ceremony. No dramatic sunrise. No swelling music. Just grey light slipping through cracked blinds and settling on a small apartment that smelled faintly of old coffee and cleaning solution. Elias woke before the alarm, as he always did. Habit was cheaper than hope. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling where a faint water stain had taken the shape of something like a bird mid-flight. He wondered, not for the first time, if freedom always looked that close and stayed that unreachable. Then the memory returned. The piano. The applause. The director's voice cutting through it all like a blade. Escort him out. Elias sat up slowly and rubbed his face. Today was a double shift. It always was after nights like that. By the time he reached the Grand Aurelius Concert Hall, the city was already alive. Horns blared. People hurried past with purpose stitched into their steps. None of them noticed the man in grey slipping through the service entrance. Inside, the hall felt different in daylight. Less magical. More honest. The chandeliers were dull without evening light. The velvet seats looked worn up close. Scratches marred the marble floors, scratches Elias had scrubbed more times than he could count. He pushed his cleaning cart toward the supply room when a voice stopped him. Moreau. The director stood near the main staircase, flanked by two administrators. His smile was thin and rehearsed. Yes. Elias replied. Come with us. They didn't wait for him to answer. The office was glass-walled and cold, overlooking the empty hall. Elias stood while the director sat, fingers steepled like a judge preparing a sentence. You embarrassed this institution, the director began. Elias blinked. I'm sorry if. Don't, the director snapped. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were doing. I was asked to play, Elias said quietly. A scoff. By a guest. Not by us. One of the administrators chimed in. We have standards. Appearances. Elias nodded. He knew those words well. The director leaned back. Last night, donors complained. Said the evening was disrupted. Said it felt unprofessional. Elias swallowed. You made us look disorganized, the director continued. Like anyone can just walk on stage. The injustice burned slowly, painfully. I fixed the piano, Elias said. I followed protocol. And then you crossed a line. Silence filled the room. The director slid a folder across the desk. Effective immediately, we're letting you go. Elias stared at the folder. Letting me go, he repeated. Termination, the director said briskly. For insubordination. The word hit harder than he expected. Elias had cleaned vomit from bathroom floors without complaint. Worked holidays. Covered shifts when others called in sick. Stayed invisible so others could shine. Insubordination. I've worked here 12 years, Elias said softly. And we appreciate your service, the director replied, already standing. Security will escort you out. The walk through the hall felt longer than it ever had. Staff members paused. Whispered. Some avoided his eyes. Others watched openly. At the service entrance, a young intern, barely old enough to shave, held the door and muttered, Guest talent doesn't pay the bills, huh? A few nearby laughed. Elias stepped outside without responding. The door shut behind him. This time, it didn't feel temporary. Word traveled fast. By afternoon, clips from the gala flooded social media. Shaky phone videos. Captions dripping with mockery. Janitor thinks he's a pianist face with tears of joy. When maintenance takes over the show. Stay in your lane. Some comments defended him. Most didn't. Someone dug up an old staff photo and circled Elias in red. Others speculated wildly about how he'd snuck onto the stage. The narrative hardened. He was a nobody who forgot his place. By evening, A local news van parked outside his building. Elias watched from behind the curtain as a reporter adjusted her mic. He didn't answer the knock. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than ever. He sat at the tiny kitchen table and stared at his hands. Hands that remembered music. Hands the world had decided were meant for mops. A knock came again, louder. "Mr. Moreau," a voice called. "We just want your side of the story." Elias closed his eyes. There was no side. There was only survival. The next day, his phone buzzed non-stop. Unknown numbers. Missed calls. Messages he didn't open. One voicemail stood out. Deep. Familiar. "Elias. It's Leon Hot Weiss. Please call me." Elias listened twice. Then a third time. He didn't call back. Hope was dangerous. Instead, he went to the employment office. He stood in line between a man who smelled of engine oil and a woman clutching a stack of resumes with trembling hands. No one cared who he'd been last night. Only who he could be useful as today. When his turn came, the clerk barely looked up. "Skills." "Cleaning," Elias said. She nodded. "Typed. Anything else?" His throat tightened. "Music," he said quietly. She paused. Looked at him over her glasses. Then continued typing. Outside, rain began to fall. Cold. Relentless. Elias walked with no destination, letting the water soak through his jacket. At a crosswalk, he stopped. Traffic roared past. On the opposite curb stood an old woman struggling with a walker, the light already blinking red. Cars honked impatiently. Without thinking, Elias stepped forward. "May I?" he asked gently. She nodded. He helped her cross slowly, shielding her from the rush, from the horns, from the world that never slowed down. When they reached the other side, she squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said. "People don't see anymore." Elias smiled faintly. "I know." He didn't know then that someone had seen. That a camera had caught more than humiliation. That injustice, once made public, sometimes attracts the wrong kind of attention, before it draws the right kind. And that the laughter wasn't finished yet. It was just gathering breath. The video changed everything. It didn't happen all at once. Not with a single headline or a dramatic announcement. It crept into the world the way truth sometimes does, quietly, persistently, refusing to be ignored. It was uploaded by someone Elias had never noticed that night. A woman sitting 3 rows back, phone held low, recording not just the performance, but what came after. The laughter. The whispers. The director's voice, clear, sharp, undeniable. "Escort him out." The clip didn't cut when Elias stood. It followed him as he apologized. As he tried to explain. As he walked past the piano one last time. And then it caught Leon Hot Weiss's face. The tight jaw. The restrained fury. The moment something decided inside him. By morning, the video had crossed 1 million views. By noon, it was everywhere. The captions changed. This man was fired for this. They mocked him, then kicked him out. When talent is ignored because of a uniform. People slowed the footage down. Zoomed in on Elias's hands. Compared his playing to recordings of great pianists. Musicians reacted first. Then teachers. Then people who had once been told, in 100 quiet ways, to stay in their place. The comments shifted. "I cried. My dad was a factory worker too." They didn't just fire him. They erased him. By the time Elias noticed, it was already too late to stop. He found out because his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers stacked on the screen like an accusation. He silenced it and sat on the edge of his bed, heart racing. Then came the knock. Not sharp. Not demanding. Careful. Elias opened the door slowly. Leon Hot Weiss stood in the hallway, rain-darkened coat still on, eyes tired but burning with purpose. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion," he said quietly. Elias stepped aside without a word. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. For a moment, neither spoke. "I watched them fire you," Leon Hot finally said. "Not in person. But afterward. Over and over." Elias nodded. I figured it would happen. Leonhardt's hands curled into fists. You shouldn't have to figure that. He leaned forward. Elias, your father saved my life. The words landed heavy. When I was 20, Leonhardt continued, I was reckless. Arrogant. I thought brilliance excused cruelty. Tien stopped me from walking away from music entirely. He told me something I never forgot. Leonhardt swallowed. If the world doesn't bow to your talent, bow to the work instead. Elias's chest tightened. He believed in humility, Leonhardt said. And in you. Elias looked down. Belief doesn't pay rent. Leonhardt nodded once. No. But justice can open doors. That afternoon, Leonhardt called a press conference. Not at the hall. Outside it. Cameras lined the steps. Reporters shouted questions. The director stood stiffly near the entrance, smile frozen, eyes darting. Leonhardt stepped to the podium. I will not perform here tonight, he announced. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I will not perform anywhere that confuses appearance with worth, he continued. Or uniforms with limits. He gestured to Elias, standing just behind him, hands clasped, unsure where to look. This man was fired for reminding us what music is. The director tried to interject. Maestro, this is a misunderstanding. Leonhardt raised his hand. No. This is accountability. He turned back to the cameras. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing my support from the Grand Aurelius Concert Hall. The words detonated. Sponsors followed within hours. Donors pulled out. Board members resigned. By evening, the director's statement of regret felt hollow against the weight of consequences. 2 days later, the director was gone. The hall issued a public apology. They offered Elias his job back. With a raise. He declined. Instead, Leonhardt made a different announcement. A scholarship. A residency. A return to music. Elias stood on a different stage a week later. Smaller. Warmer. Filled with people who listened like it mattered. He played without fear. Without apology. And for the first time since his father died, the silence after the final note didn't feel like loss. It felt like arrival. But justice wasn't done yet. Because one more person needed to be seen. One more story needed its ending. And the world was finally ready to listen. 5 years later, the hall sounded different. Not louder. Not grander. True. Sunlight poured through tall windows of the Etienne Moreau Music House, warming the wooden floors where dozens of children sat cross-legged, waiting. Some clutched worn sheet music. Others hugged borrowed instruments like lifelines. Their clothes didn't match. Their shoes were scuffed. Their eyes, however, were bright. Elias stood near the piano, fingers resting lightly on the keys, watching them settle. He still wore simple clothes. Still moved quietly. Fame had brushed past him but never stuck. He'd learned long ago that noise wasn't the same as meaning. A small plaque near the entrance read, "Music for those the world overlooks." He remembered the first day the doors opened. He remembered doubting anyone would come. They had come anyway. Now, the room was full. A boy in the front row raised his hand. "Mr. Moreau." "Yes." Elias said. "Why do you clean the floors yourself?" A few kids giggled. Elias smiled. "Because dignity isn't about what you do. It's about how you do it." The boy nodded like this was important information. Like he'd carry it somewhere later. At the back of the room, Leonhardt Weiss leaned against the wall, older now, quieter. He didn't announce himself anymore. He preferred to listen. The world had changed Elias's life overnight. But Elias had changed his own life by staying the same. After the scandal, opportunities had poured in. Tours. Endorsements. Big stages with bigger lights. He'd said no to most of them. Instead, he'd taken the settlement money from the hall, combined it with Leonhardt's donation, and bought this building. A place where no one asked what your parents did. A place where uniforms didn't define futures. A place where talent was listened to before it was judged. Elias pressed a key. The sound was gentle. Let's begin, he said. As the lesson unfolded, he caught sight of a familiar figure in the doorway. An elderly woman with a walker. Her hair was white now, thinner. But her eyes were sharp. Knowing. Elias excused himself and crossed the room. You came, he said. She smiled. I told you I would. Years ago, after the video went viral, reporters had tracked her down. The woman Elias had helped cross the street that rainy afternoon. They called her a symbol. She hated that word. She'd told them something else instead. He didn't help me because cameras were watching, she'd said. He helped me because he thought no one was. Her family had tried to thank him. He'd refused the checks. Accepted the story. Now she watched the children play, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. My husband would have loved this, she whispered. Elias nodded. Mine too. That night, after the children left, Elias sat alone at the piano. The room was quiet. Not empty. Quiet in the way that feels earned. He placed his hands on the keys and played the same piece he'd played the night everything broke open. It sounded different now. Not sadder. Not happier. Complete. When the final note faded, Elias didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it exist. Somewhere out there, people were still laughing at janitors. Still measuring worth by titles. Still telling others to stay in their place. But here was proof that kindness echoes longer than cruelty. That dignity, once claimed, cannot be taken back. And that the quietest hands often carry the loudest truths. Elias closed the piano gently. He turned off the lights. And as he stepped into the night, the city didn't swallow him this time. It made room. Because sometimes, the world doesn't change all at once. Sometimes, it changes because one person refused to believe they were invisible. And played anyway.